Hey, it's Anita, and this is the Anita Posch Show. Hello everybody, welcome to the Anita Posch Show, where it is my pleasure to keep you up to date with topics around Bitcoin on a global stage and also the local impact it has on people like you and me. My guest today is B Levine. Adam is not only the managing editor for podcasts and audio at Coindesk, he's also the host of the longest running English language talk show about Bitcoin called Speaking of Bitcoin, formerly known as Let's Talk Bitcoin. I appreciate Adam's work a lot. I have been an avid listener of his podcast for many years now. Adam is also the CEO of Tokenly.com. He has minted some NFTs by himself and he had Metakovan on his show. Metakovan is the guy who bought Beeple's NFT for $69 million, the most expensive NFT sold at an art auction up till today. Our topic are NFTs and how they are going to shape the world of art in the future. If you want to support my show, I would ask you to go to anita.link/donate. At the moment, I only have one sponsor. If you're a company and want to be a part of the show, please send me an email to hello@anitaposch.com. As always, you can watch this video on YouTube. Please be sure to subscribe to my channel, and you can also find it on all major podcast platforms. Just search for my name, Anita Posch, P-O-S-C-H, and you will find it. And now, a very short word from my sponsors today, and then on to the interview. Enjoy! Many people worry about the right storage for their Bitcoin. And yes, holding them isn't always easy. The safest way is offline, physically. That's why Coinfinity developed the Card Wallet, the professional and easy solution. Order it now at cardwallet.com/Anita and get 20% off. Do you want to stay up to date with the things that happen in Bitcoin from my point of view? Then subscribe to Anita's Weekly, my newsletter with articles, videos, quotes, short tips on how to use Bitcoin and all that for free. Subscribe to Anita's Weekly at anita.link/weekly. Hello, Adam. Welcome to the show. I'm glad that you're here.
Thank you very much for the invitation, Anita. It's always great to talk to you.
Yeah, Adam, before I spoke the introduction and I said I really appreciate your work a lot because you are the host of the longest running English language Bitcoin talk show with fabulous co-hosts. And you also had Metakovan on the show in the last weeks. Mm-hmm. And Metakovan's the one who bought Beeple's NFT for $69 million. And yeah, we're going to talk about all that. And please, before we start, because maybe people don't know you yet, please introduce yourself.
Oh, sure. Yeah, so my name's B Levine. I'm not the other Adam Levine. I'm the one with the B initial. But if you search for me on the internet now, you'll find me if you search for B Levine. There used to be a bunch of lawyers who competed with me. Anyways, I started doing Bitcoin podcasts back. Well, I started doing podcasts back in 2005 in the gaming space. I started doing Bitcoin podcasts and building Bitcoin communities in 2011. And then in 2013, I started my 5th Bitcoin podcast, the second one under my real name. And you know, it was the right place, right time. There was really no other English language accessible content at the time. Podcast took off very quickly. Within a year, I had gotten tired of the fact that the only podcasts that I could listen to were effectively mine, because all the other ones that had started up subsequently had not been able to kind of survive that year, because at the time there was no money in it. I mean, let's just be real. You know, we were entirely tip supported for a long time back when Bitcoin tipping was like a big thing. I turned it into a podcast network and helped start about 15 other shows. As part of that, I was one of the very early users of tokens. Back in late 2013, early 2014, I created a tokenized rewards program called LTB Coin that was effectively an incentivization mechanism for audience on one side and for content creators on the other side. We had kind of this multi-layered approach to, effectively having each of these different groups of people compete for a fixed amount of the token that was going to be allowed. This was kind of my conception of like, well, if you don't have to mine for consensus, what can you mine for? And you mine for engagement. And today we're starting to see that. And that's, again, really exciting to see those roll out in meaningful ways. I started a company called Tokenly in 2014, first started as an open source project, and then I spun it into a funded project to build out infrastructure for the types of token use cases that I had created. And that I was increasingly exploring, because we basically found that once you created the token back in the early days, like you had a token now, and that was like really magical, because before that you used to have to launch a whole blockchain and have to have miners and all these other things. And so the ability to use the Bitcoin blockchain in our case made it so that you could do something else with the token. And like I said, we formed our kind of own idea of what mining could be if you didn't need it for consensus. So Tokenly in 2015 turned into a real company. I funded it myself initially with my family, and from some early participation in the crypto space. And then in 2016, we did a $500,000 round on Bank to the Future in an equity crowd sale, and never sold the token. That was the one thing, like the LTB coin token, I was always very concerned would come around to, bite me in the butt. And so we just gave it out to people, and that was pretty cool. After I started the company, that started taking more and more and more of my time. And we had built this whole kind of custom community platform with, token control access forums and like lots of different community features. And we had a really great community. And I felt like I was not doing a particularly good job of stewarding it, since I was spending so much of my time on the entrepreneurial side. And so I sold the network to BTC Media, which I had felt like had done a good job with Bitcoin Magazine. And in hindsight, that was not great, not my favorite decision that I've made. But one of the things that was interesting about it was that we had a end of life event for the LTB coin token that we had launched. And people were able to trade their LTB coin token in for a token called PO, which for a while, some people were able to, extract a lot of money from their participation in the LTB coin project and from the LTB network. And that was really cool to see too, because we had always kind of been like, well, this is useful within our ecosystem, but if we ever get acquired, then, I'll make sure this is part of the buyout. And so we were able to do that. And that was a kind of very exciting tokens don't usually have end of lives, right? They just kind of go on and on and on, and people stop using them. And maybe they, come back at some point in the future. But yeah, so that was a cool thing. And then we can talk about it more. I built a number of different products with Tokenly, tokenmarkets.com, token.fm, and identity, and off-chain token control access system called Token Pass, and a whole bunch of other things, actually. We built on-chain vending machines called SwapBots super early. And then basically we went to launch some of the projects around the time that the ICO boom was, starting to get serious, and our lawyers threatened to quit when we tried to do an ICO. And so then I went down the rabbit hole of trying to do a security token. And then at the end of that process, I figured out that security tokens, although they're possible to do, actually nobody wants them. And this was in 2018. So there was no infrastructure for them and no real market for them. There isn't even really today, but it's starting at least. And then I tried to fundraise around that stuff. Without using a token in an environment where everybody wanted a token for about 18 months, and just got completely demoralized with my ability to actually, complete any of this stuff, because I wasn't willing to take the risks to do a token. And then I went to, so I'm giving you my entire history here. That's what's happened. That's what's happened.
Yeah.
So then I went to Pete Rizzo over at Coindesk, who was the editor-in-chief at the time. And we didn't really have much of a relationship. We'd kind of always been ships passing in the night. He was also early to the space. And I was like, hey, you should syndicate Let's Talk Bitcoin. Because the audience over on the network, one of the things that I had given up in that sale was my subscription feed, which I had used to bootstrap distribution for the entire network. And so we had seen distribution go from about, in the, 10,000, 10,000 to 15,000 range on a per episode basis, down to about 3,000 over the course of 3 years. And just in general, I was unhappy with on the one hand, the way that the network was managed, and on the other hand, their unwillingness to really include me in any sort of way that could help them to stop the bleeding. And so I was like, let me syndicate with you. And that conversation over the course of 6 months turned into me building out a podcast product for Coindesk, which had tried before but hadn't had a bunch of success. And so I came on there in October of 2019 as a editor of a new podcast division, unbudgeted, just me. I identified Nathaniel Whitmore as an early talent who was doing a show called Crypto 3 at 3 at the time on YouTube with about 100 audience members after about 3 months. And so we talked with him. We rebranded the show as The Breakdown. And then we relaunched it on Coindesk. And I edited that myself every day for about 6 months while I was doing, other shows too. I have other shows I do at Coindesk. And then I started, and then it was a wild success. And I hired Rob Mitchell from the Bitcoin Game as my deputy editor, and he took over that. And I'll stop going through this this incredibly detailed litany. But that's kind of where I am now.
I guess we should also do an episode about podcasting in the Bitcoin space. That would be very interesting.
It's very
and
yeah.
You made so many different things. You learned so much, I guess, and you have so many stories to tell about all that stuff. Too. Yeah,
I get a very cool thing coming out around NFTs later this month. It's going to be something unlike we've ever seen before in crypto. It's gonna be fun.
Okay, I'm looking forward. Okay, long story short. No, going back to the beginning, because I would be interested in why did you even start looking into Bitcoin? When did you hear about it the first time, and why were you interested in it?
Yeah, so I heard about Bitcoin in 2011. And in 2011, I was unemployed, actually. I had been doing sales at my father's company. My father was a second-generation paper salesman, had gone off with a couple of partners to start an upstart company called Excellent Packaging, which basically specialized in environmentally friendly food service packaging products. So if you see like a plate that's made of sugarcane bagasse, or a fork that's made of bioplastic. Those were the types of things that we were doing in 2007, 2008, 2009, and we introduced many of those products to the U.S. markets. And so that gave me a set of experiences where I was aware of a lot of the problems with the internet because the systems that we were using were very antiquated, and the challenges around actually transferring ownership when you're not transferring physical ownership, like to do drop shipping or something like that, kind of demonstrate the challenges around the internet. So skipping ahead a little bit, so after I had lost this job and was just kind of trying to figure out what to do, this is kind of in the aftermath of the financial crisis, and I had been really trying to understand money because I realized I had come out of school with effectively no understanding of how these systems actually worked, and they seemed really, really important. And I didn't really understand what was wrong with them, but I understood that something was wrong with them intuitively. There was some sort of problem that meant that these things were not performing their functions. And so I was really interested in gold. I was really interested in Bitcoin. I was really interested in any sort of alternative that kind of looked like it might be something that's disconnected from the existing system, at least partially. And I mean, to put this in context, though, in terms of how much I bought in, I think I spent about $100 on Bitcoin at the time, and I spent about $500 on Iraqi dinar. And Iraqi dinar is still an ongoing internet scam, right? Where basically after the U.S. invaded Iraq, the currency went very poorly, right? Because the government was divested, government currency, really problematic. And so there was this narrative on the internet, and still is today, that the Iraqi dinar currency is going to be revalued. The U.S. is going to leave. They'll revalue the currency. The currency will be worth 100 times, 200 times, whatever what the face value is, and it'll be a great investment. So I thought that was more likely than Bitcoin to actually be a thing. And my concern about Bitcoin was always that it just felt like something like this couldn't work, right? And so I got involved. I'm a very entrepreneurial type of person. So the first project I actually designed before I even really got involved with any of this stuff was this the idea of a physical Bitcoin called a Betcoin. There was basically a poker chip that would have Bitcoin imbued into it, and then wax, tamper evidence seals, and all kinds of stuff like that. And I thought that was a really cool idea. So anyways, so that was kind of the mindset that I was in. And then my mode of communicating with people and of sharing ideas has always been podcasts. Since about 2005, when I stumbled into it by accident in the gaming sector, like I said, And then after I had done the gaming thing, I built a whole community there with columnists and a whole thing, and it was actually very successful. And then I had worked on a game mod for this game called Company of Heroes that was like this persistent multiplayer thing, and I got into shoutcasting, right, like narrating game replays like you do like sportscasting and stuff like that. And so I hadn't really done many podcasts in that time, and I started doing a Bitcoin podcast first with, I believe, the creator of the Bitcoin subreddit, who went by Atlas, and he was about like a 17-year-old hardcore libertarian, like the type of libertarian who is like, I'm not afraid of having any conversation with anybody. My principles can stand up to that. And so I started doing a show called Bit Talk with Atlas and Atom, ATOM. I'm not very good at hiding my name, but that was what it was. I actually ran an episode of that on the Speaking of Bitcoin, formerly Let's Talk Bitcoin feed.
I heard it.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's it's interesting to look back at those early episodes. So that was one of 5 podcasts that I started. I started 2 additional ones, which I won't go into. And then I started the Daily Bitcoin Show about a week before I started Let's Talk Bitcoin. And the Daily Bitcoin Show had a different cast and a different crew, and I was like, it's like the Seinfeld thing, feats of strength, right? So I never really had a lot of resources to work with. I was actually living with my parents in a tiny house that was on their property that used to like have a loom in it from forever ago, and living there with my wife. And so we had actually moved to my parents' house to work on permaculture projects. And I was like, all this is nonsense. Like, let's just focus on that. And then Bitcoin started doing stuff. And I was trying to understand what was going on, and it was obvious that there was just no place that you could go to actually like understand this stuff if you weren't like a developer or an engineer. It was basically Bitcoin Talk on the one side, and then the Reddit had been started, but it was pretty small at that point. And so I started the Daily Bitcoin Show, and the Daily Bitcoin Show ran for 5 days, and then I collapsed at the end of it because I was basically doing all of the editing, and I was doing this on Audacity, I think. And just in general, like the pace was nuts, and it was a pretty highly produced show. And what actually caused it to collapse, though, was that we had been so successful in that first week that we had an investor, a listener, come to us who wanted to invest into it. And so I had like a bunch of conversations with him and set up this investment. And I contacted my my co-hosts, who were basically just walk-on roles. They would like walk on and they would, talk about stuff with me, and then I would go off and do the edit and do the posting and do the prep for the episode and kind of all the other stuff. And I was like, hey guys, this looks like it's going to work. So let's formalize this relationship. I'd like each of you to have 20% equity in the project, and I'm going to keep 60% since it's my idea and I'm doing everything. And they basically walked off at that point, and we're like, that's not a fair reflection of the work. And so I was like, all right, well, okay, never mind. And so Andreas Antonopoulos had been our final guest, our first guest on the show, on the Daily Bitcoin Show, and our final guest, and he was talking about Mt. Gox at the time, and kind
empty
of concerns
Gox.
about Mount
How
Gox.
he's saying
exactly.
he's going empty. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I had known Stephanie Murphy because she had been doing a show called Pork Therapy, and I had, through a listener, I had been connected with her, and she had done the intro for the Daily Bitcoin Show. And I really liked the show that she did with Pork Therapy, and I really liked Andreas, and I thought that he was, again, a great guest. I had actually talked to him months before about potentially being a host on the Daily Bitcoin Show, but he was under a non-compete or something like that didn't expire until shortly after. So the timing was kind of like just right to pull in these people, and we started doing Let's Talk Bitcoin as a twice weekly show, and it immediately took off, bootstrapped from the success that we'd had with the Daily Bitcoin Show. The feed on FeedBurner is still called the Daily Bitcoin Show. That's the one that the LTB network still uses today, which is very funny. So, but that was kind of what led me to it. And then from there, it was just a wild ride, and I just did my best to hang on and to try and be as helpful and kind of clarifying as possible.
Mm-hmm, cool. So 2 weeks ago or something, you had Metakovan on. And Metakovan is the buyer of Beeple's artwork, the NFT that was sold for $69 million in Ether. Let's talk a little bit more now about the NFT space and the use cases and how the art world is going to look in the future, because I think it will change a lot. What was Metakovan's reasoning? Why did he pay so much money for an NFT?
Well, this was a big question that I had too. You know, like, I think there's a couple of factors that go into it. I think first off, he just wanted it. And the second thing that's interesting about this is that, like, we think about it as $69 million, but that's not really the opportunity cost that he had. The opportunity, like, the cost of that money for him was a lot lower, right? Like, he probably, you know, bought a lot during the crowd sale for Ethereum, or there was a long period of time where Ether traded for very, very small amounts of money. And so it's interesting to think about, what is the Beeple sale valued at today? It's probably double that, right? Because of how much Ether has appreciated, right? So it's kind of all relative, right? So that's the thing that I have to constantly remind myself of. And one of the first things that I wrote in kind of the Bitcoin world, went on IRC, did a bunch of interviews, was the new renaissance, how Bitcoin millionaires will change the world. And that piece basically I interviewed a lot of people. I think Eric Voorhees too. So it was like the first interview I ever did with him. And the thing that was interesting to me was that, again, because these were people who felt like they had basically found a windfall, right? They were thinking differently about the money than people who are traditionally rich. And they were much more kind of idealistic, much more sort of, like visionary in terms of painting that sort of belief. And that is in large part because they perceived personally their cost of that money to have been very low relative to the now potential good that they could do with it. And I think we've seen that a lot of times in crypto. I think, again, you look at the Doge community, and the Doge community, for everything else that we might think about it, like, they've actively undertaken, and I fully expect that to ramp up aggressively as the price of Doge goes crazy. Like this very charity driven, right? Like, it's partly about generating press, but a lot of it is just about, this is silly, so why not actually do some good in the real world? And I think that that's something that kind of stretches across to all of this. So part of it is about the cost of money. And kind of the way that changes the psychology of how you feel when you spend it. The other part, I think, is signaling, and that's something that we've seen that I've really I respond well to incentives. I'm very opportunistic, right? If I see an opportunity to connect two dots together that would solve a problem for me or be valuable to me in another way, then that's something I'm going to try to do. And I think that a lot of people are like that. And one of the things that's always been really challenging about it, a lot of people, who are early in crypto are like that. I think one of the things that's been really challenging about like a lot of these technologies, like NFTs, for example, is that you kind of have a first mover problem where if you just do something, like I've done so many things and they haven't worked, right? And that's in large part because nobody cares. But one of the things that people care about is big dollar amounts. And so if you can have an NFT that sells for $69 million, or at least looks like it sells for $69 million, because really the cost of the person is like maybe $50,000, right? In terms of what they spent to get that money. And then it just appreciated in value so much. Then you can create a signaling event, right? And a signaling event is like, I like to think about it like it sends up a beacon, right? And that beacon is so much more visible than the things that are actually happening on the ground, that it's visible and it attracts attention from a fundamentally different and much larger group of people who are out there. So I think that played a large role in it too. And I actually asked him that because that's been my thesis around, like, why would someone pay $69 million for that? That's the reason. The reason is because it's partly about wanting to have it and because you have the money to do it. And it's also partly because it's important as a milestone in the journey of these technologies and as a way for people to better understand them. This is something we've seen with Bitcoin over and over again, right? Like when Bitcoin was below $10 and then it spiked to over $120, which was one of the first bubbles that I witnessed personally, like there were a lot of people, including myself, who were like, this could actually be a thing. Like it's not behaving in a way that looks like it's about to fail. It's behaving in a way where it looks like it's a speculative asset that we don't understand the value of, but we know that the value is probably higher. And the cost of running it, the cost of doing all this other stuff at the time, again, people were starting to mine with GPUs, but like it was still largely, like CPUs, and the first ASICs were in development at that point. So mining was much more kind of egalitarian, and you could do it, and the tokens had just been cheap, right? The biggest challenge in the early days was finding the tokens, was actually figuring out, like, how do I get this thing? I tell a story, it's the first time I didn't buy Bitcoin was when, on the Bitcoin Talk forum, there was this guy who went by Bitcoin Morpheus. and he was based out of DC, and you would send him an envelope of cash, like literally in the mail, and then he would send you Bitcoin. Like he promised to send you Bitcoin. So I was like, no, that's too sketchy. So I didn't do that. But like that I think is the thing, just generally about this space and about NFTs specifically. You know, like it's this beaconing event that then attracts attention. And I think the other event besides the Beeple sale, which is important as a price event, but not important as a mass adoption event, I think the Top Shot project is very important as a mass adoption event. And I think what Top Shot has showed us, Dapper Labs does it. It's the NBA licensing tie-in. Any given time, you know, that they want to introduce a new pack of cards or something like that. These cards do nothing at this point. They, you know, will have like 350,000 people sitting there waiting to buy one, right, for like $9 to $14. And there'll be, you know, like 90,000 packs, right, that they sell for this price. And so they can just effectively print money on the one side, which is very interesting. And then on the other side, with the product that people want. And then on the other side, they still, even releasing 90,000 packs at a time, have, you know, like 4 out of 5 people don't wind up getting the thing that they want. And so that's really interesting too. And it's interesting to think about Dapper and what they're doing with Flow insofar as the technology is almost irrelevant. The technology is a limiting factor in this case, because the types of people who we're talking about who are interested in that type of project, they're not there for that. They're there for the tie-in to the brand that they like, which is, you know, basketball. And so that's another, I think, really important takeaway about this moment that we're having with NFTs is that, like, I think it's really tempting to believe that people understand things in the way that we understand things. And I don't think that that's true. I think that that's a belief I used to have that's been largely beaten out of me over the last 6 years of trying to figure out how do you actually offer better options for people, right? And that's what technology really is it's connecting dots, and it's making opportunities available that are not available without it. So the technology stops being a limiting factor. And it starts being an enabling factor. And that's really exciting around all of this stuff. And so again, it's just to say that the NFT moment is right now on the one side about signaling, and on the other side, it's about the realization that technology can be a limiting factor more than it could be something that, you know, like you need it there for the thing to work, but Dapper doesn't care about the technology. That's not the reason why they're being successful. They're successful because of all the factors around that. And the technology is arguably making it harder.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I heard an interview with Beeple on the Kara Swisher show. I mean, Kara Swisher is sadly also an opponent, or she doesn't understand Bitcoin, I think. And Beeple, I heard him like a little bit proud say, yes, he immediately exchanged the Ether to US dollars. And he doesn't really believe in Bitcoin. He believes in the things around and NFTs and such. I mean, is your heart bleeding when you hear something like that, or no?
Yeah. I don't judge people in terms of what they believe or don't believe. So I mean, like, I understand the impulse to that, right? Which is that crypto has been good to him, right? Like this was clearly a good thing. But the flip side is that, again, like as we were talking about, if he had kept it, he would have doubled his money basically from the price that you know, that he got. But that's the thing, is that like if you have more than $10 million, like you like if you want to be like a billionaire, like if that's your aspiration, well then $10 million isn't very much money. But if you're just a normal person who's like, hey, I would like to live my life knowing that I have the stability to do what I want and not necessarily work at a day job, $10 million gets you a long way, and $60 million gets you even further. So I don't fault him for that at all. You know, like we all have our different risk tolerances, and I've never had less crypto than I do today, largely because for so long I didn't really have a lot to lose. And so I was just like all in it, right? Just like all in it. But the emotional roller coaster that can take you on is very, I found to be challenging. I found that every time I thought I would learn a lesson about the right way to behave in a given situation in terms of what these markets do, then I would learn that actually that was the lesson from the last time, but the lesson from this time is entirely different, and it's the opposite of the thing that I learned last time. So I got a mortgage these days, and I have a bunch of people over right now actually who are much more involved with the markets than I am. And I'm just like, it's almost an entirely different universe to think about. And it creates cognitive dissonance in me because I'm such an opportunist. I'm like, oh man, I'm leaving tons of money on the table by not participating in this. And on the other hand, I'm like, yeah, but I sleep so well at night. And, you know, like I'm not concerned in the way that I used to. And I don't know about you, Anita, but I mean, like for all the advantages that come from, you know, being your own bank in this space, like there's so much responsibility. And I know so many people, myself included, who have lost so much just because of one tiny little mistake, and you just can never undo it.
Yeah, you mean the self-custody thing, or did you trade your Bitcoin for something else?
No, I did all of it. But I do mean the self-custody thing. There's just so many things that can go wrong.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, to be honest, I feel quite safe. I don't move Bitcoin around very much. I have a safe place, and yeah, of course, I every other month I'm checking my hardware wallets and stuff, and if everything is fine. But other than that, I sleep very well, and you know, I think long term, and of course, I hope that in 10, 20 years, my Bitcoin will be still there where I think they are. And if it's not there, then it's not there anymore. You know, I'm healthy. I have my work and the podcast and the knowledge I have, and I think I will make it. But of course, I would cry a lot.
Yeah. I find that I have to make everything personal. Like I've been getting to understand my personality better as time goes on, and you know, and it's a big advantage a lot of times to you know, to make everything so personal, and on the other side, it makes a lot of things really challenging. So, but again, like I mostly feel responsible. Like I've helped people set up, you know, like multi-signature wallets where then the protocol has changed out from under them in terms of the way that the wallet implemented it. Specifically, this was the copay wallet. And that was challenging, took months and months and months. I've had people who like didn't properly secure stuff, literally had their computer hacked and then, you know, like lost it off of there. And just again, like there are real advantages to the self-custodying thing, but there are real challenges that come with it. And I think that even for people who really understand it, it's difficult. Like if you're a security expert, then, you know, it's great. And if you have a very simple way that you set up this stuff. Anyways, I'll stop talking about this. I'm just saying, like, I have such mixed feelings about all of this. On the one side, it's so empowering to give people options. On the other side, I've seen firsthand how much pain that can cause. And so it's a very, you know, double-sided blade.
Yeah, that's true. But I have the impression that the mix of multi-signature and not only self-custodied, but like products like Casa or I think Unchained Capital for like bigger stashes of money, I would say, or Bitcoin. I think that they are quite helpful, and also that the technology is developing so fast. I mean, you were in much earlier than I did. I mean, these technological difficulties, I think it's much easier today. I mean, you back in the days, there weren't even hardware wallets.
No, it's true. I was just looking through some stuff and finding things that aren't even hierarchical deterministic wallets.
Yeah, exactly.
So, you know, like, so, you know, right now you need a seed phrase. Back then, your wallet would just like generate a random address and it wouldn't keep track of that address if you weren't like actively backing your stuff up. So no, it's wild. There's definitely, like I said, it's very empowering, but with power comes responsibility.
Exactly. And it's also something I think that we have to repeat over and over again. The people who managed to buy and hold Bitcoin from like 2012 up to today, that was hard work. That's not luck. You know, those people didn't get lucky. I mean, some of them maybe, but it's a lot of work in it too.
The best strategy that I have found is to completely forget what you own. That is the single best strategy, to do a good job of securing it so that it's future-proofed, but then to do that. But to your point about the technology advancing so fast, that actually is the challenge that I've run into a couple of times, is that the protocols will change a little bit. And like for example, the way that the Trezor was implemented early on changed in terms of how you interact with hardware wallets, because Chrome extensions changed how they operate, right? And so like that's the experience I've had, is I'm like, these are the best, you know, current industry standards and this is the way to secure it. And then like 3 years later I come back to that person and they're like, I can't get to it. And it's just like, it's like, it's an active managed process, right? Like you have to be doing what you're talking about, which is like every month or every 6 months or something like that, going back and revisiting your stuff, making sure that nothing's changed. Because if you miss a couple of updates, then stuff can go hinky. But I mean, again, like, I think that it's really good that these things have the capabilities to do that. And I know it's totally not the Bitcoin thing to say at all. But I like these insured exchanges. You know, I like the Coinbases of the world as an ease of use thing, and like it creates all kinds of problems. But my point broadly is that there isn't a scenario where you don't have problems, right? There are challenges whether you're self-custodying or whether you're trusting someone else with custody. It's really just a question of like, what's the best fit for you? Because again, like I have like a lot of my parents' friends, for example, like if I tried to set them up with 12 words, like that's a losing game, right? like you just can't even do that. So anyways, we can move on, but I've very much softened my kind of really hardcore approach because I've seen the downsides of that too. And I think a balance, again, based on what each individual needs is really kind of the answer to a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, and coming back to people, I mean, you can't force people to hold on to their Ether or Bitcoin if they don't feel comfortable with it or they don't know how to secure it. So that said, I mean, of course, he exchanges it.
Or if they don't believe in it. I mean, I think he made it pretty clear he doesn't believe in it, but that's okay. That's he doesn't need to believe it. For NFTs, the signaling event doesn't require him to believe it. It required him or somebody else to make the sale. He was the guy who did it. You know, he put in a lot of work around this stuff. I don't particularly, you know, like the piece that he sold. You know, I mean, like, is that really worth $69 million? I don't know. But again, as an important milestone for NFTs broadly, it opened up the market in ways that is fundamentally different. We were talking with, through my company Tokenly, I was talking with Zynga, the makers of Farmville, about doing unique tokens and about doing fungible tokens and stuff like that to power their Farmville game and a bunch of other games that they were working on. And, you know, like we talked with their CTO and I have the email. They're basically like, yeah, we don't think we're going to do anything with this. Like completely disinterested. Why would we do something like this? And now that's not the conversation. Now the conversation is how do we get in? How do we take advantage of this opportunity? And so when you see that the game theory shift like that, that's really exciting to me. And again, it just continues to speak to the fact that a lot of the things I've believed have been right. I've just been like 4 years early. So,
yeah.
You know, I can't complain.
So, and what's your idea now? How can the future art world, look like? Because people speak of the democratization of art, because you have gatekeepers at the moment, people who say that's a good artist, that's not one. So basically, like content creators on the internet, through NFTs, you can earn some money online. What's your vision? What's your thoughts about that?
Internet collectibles have never really been a thing because you couldn't really do ownership on the internet. And so it took me about 3 years in crypto to actually come to this conclusion. But the thing that blockchains do is they allow you to track who owns what stuff on the internet. It's really simple. With Bitcoin, you're tracking who owns what, you know, money. With other things, you're tracking other types of ownership. But ownership in general and the ability to track it's really useful. So I think from that perspective, it creates a new market opportunity. One of the things that I went after was like internet cartoonists. I registered counterparty assets under all, you know, the names of like all of the major cartoonists and approached a couple of them again like 4 or 5 years ago at this point. And again, almost no interest. But I think that really is it, is that if you can take something of yours and you can turn it into a token that has a limited amount of them, then that gives you something that you can sell that doesn't actually have a physical production, you know, side to it. And that's really cool. And the ability to show these things off, also really cool. So as far as like the ability to do it, I think that that's a really neat thing. Now, I don't think this fundamentally changes the dynamics of the art market. I know that that's a popular narrative right now. I don't believe that it's true. Ultimately, this is a medium that will have gatekeepers too. And the way that art works, or really any sort of pop culture phenomenon works, is that like there's the like top 10, right? And like they get most of the money. And that's just because of the nature of kind of this trendy stuff. And then like the bottom 90 gets not very much at all. So what I've kind of discovered about NFTs is that you need to have an audience that wants to give you money in order for it to really solve anything at all. And it's not to say you can't be discovered through NFTs. I think that people can and they are. But I think that at this stage, it's not about that. It's about connecting the dots for people who already want to give you money to give you money for something that is an internet collectible. And maybe that winds up being great. Maybe it winds up being a dumb idea. But hey, I mean, people do all kinds of things. And, you know, and I think that this is another venue for exploration around that. I do like the idea that that artist revenue splits can be built in at either a protocol level or a platform level. And I think more than anything, what I see about blockchains just broadly, but it also applies here, is that if you're working with a gallery or you're working with something like that in the real world, they are effectively a service provider, right? So they are like, you are the person who's created the content, they are providing the platform. That is a service provider relationship. But they do not treat that relationship like a service provider relationship for the most part. They treat it kind of like a partnership where they have a lot of power, a lot of control, and keep a lot of the money. And so that is the thing I think that kind of blockchain platforms open up, is the ability to say, all right, well, I'm listing this through your platform, but actually it's just everywhere, right? And so you are not my partner, you are the platform I am choosing to use, and I have many other options in order to do that. And I think that that's the important part of the relationship, is it takes the lock-in out of these types of relationships. And certainly you can choose to, just list it with one person or whatever and not put it onto a blockchain. But if you do put it onto a blockchain, then you open yourself up to that large potential market. So I think that that's really powerful and kind of where I see this going. I also think it's really powerful that people are now thinking about things differently, right? Digital art has not really been something that has been particularly monetizable because it's digital art. You can make as many copies of it as you want. Now, right now, I think that the market is looking at things in a very naive way and saying that, so when I think of NFTs, I think of like a physical key, right? Like a key you put into a lock and open it. And the value of a key is that it can unlock things that you don't have access to if you don't have the key. The way I've been kind of describing the period we're in right now for NFTs is that people have figured out that you can paint keys, right? And then they're looking at the painting on the key, right? And they're saying, oh, this is such a pretty key. I value it because of how it looks. But the value of the key is not how it looks. The value of the key is what it does. And so that is what I'm particularly excited about and what I believe is coming in the very near future. I've gotten an early look at some very cool one-of-one NFTs that are coming out that fundamentally change the way that we think about ownership of these things. And I think that that's going to be the new trend. I unfortunately can't talk about it right now because I'm under embargo on it. But again, like where we are now is the very naive way, and where we are going is a way that is much more empowering, much more interesting, and I believe will drive the market for a while. The other thing that's interesting about NFTs is just that they're non-fungible tokens. So the ability to create a marketplace, the ability to be discovered, the ability to have liquidity is very challenging. I'm very curious to see what happens around that, because you can't really have like a marketplace where every single thing is unique without having basically like you need to apply something like the world of DeFi has done with liquidity pools and stuff like that around these things. I don't even know if that's possible, and I don't know if it is possible, then it would actually help the situation. But we need something like that, because otherwise, like, there's going to be an infinite amount of NFTs that are issued by different people for different reasons. And so the ability to kind of at least pair like things together and say these are similar enough that we're going to say that they're fungible, or that, like it's at least some sort of categorization, like that's what's really needed for discovery to happen. And you go to all the platforms that are out there today and they're either curated or they're full of junk, right? And the curated ones you basically can't get onto, and the ones that are full of junk, well, I mean, like they just kind of look junky. So it's an interesting challenge, and one that I think that we'll overcome. But that's kind of where we are right now.
Yeah, and they are also not interchangeable. That's what I understand. So if you buy an NFT on one platform, then you're bound to this one, no?
Not necessarily. It really depends. Like there's there were 10 NFT platforms last year, and this year there's like 150. And, by the end of the year, there'll be 1,000, right? Like, it's going to explode.
Yeah, and up until now, all of those are on Ethereum or also on other blockchains?
They're on other blockchains, too. One just rolled out on Tezos. Binance Smart Chain has one. Dapper, which is doing the NBA Top Shot, and a bunch of others, built their own blockchain called Flow. People are doing them, starting to do them on Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. The counterparty protocol has been around forever, but now there's also the Liquid side chain, and I believe they just rolled it out. And then RSK, which is a side chain that uses the Ethereum virtual machine, is also there. Everything has kind of upsides and downsides, and it's really tempting to be like, this is the platform that people should use, but I, again, increasingly believe that different use cases have different requirements. And so to try and dictate to people, what the correct thing is, or to try to even pick winners at this point is just silly. So the approach that I've always taken, and increasingly take, is to actually roll tokens off chain, and then to make it so that people can so not actually put them on a blockchain, have them as effectively potential tokens, right? Because the value of an NFT isn't spending it, right? The value of an NFT is possessing it and then getting access to something or something like that, right? So if you take this approach, that it makes it so that, one, you can deal with people very cleanly who want to spend dollars, because most of the people who actually are interested in this stuff just want to use their credit card. And again, like, we can argue whether that's a good idea or a bad idea, but if you give them back a token, it's a bad idea, right? Because the payment that they give you is reversible. The token that you give them is not reversible. And so that's kind of always been the problem in crypto. But if you give them a temporary token, then there's really no problem there. And then you can give them the option. You say, they're like, I want this on a blockchain. And you're like, all right, what blockchain do you want it on? Do you want it on Ethereum? It'll cost $15 to put it on Ethereum. Do you want it on, Binance Smart Chain? It'll cost 2 cents, but the security is probably problematic. So you just kind of give people the options, and then they pick what's best for them. And, the winner winds up emerging, and we don't have to try to pick things. And at the same time, we don't have to say, oh, well, that's a bad use case, right? That token only costs 2 cents. So why would you put it on Ethereum? That's a dumb use case. No, it's not a dumb use case, just a dumb use case for Ethereum.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of the future, like if I buy an NFT today, like if I would have bought one of yours, you minted some in the last months or something. Yeah. How was that experience for you? And if I would have bought it, which wallet do I need? Or how do I save it, store it?
I have purchased one or two. I bought a really cool algorithmic piece from an artist named Israel Wilson. That's like the only NFT that I've actually purchased, but I thought it was really cool. I've been doing some graphic work. I take pictures and then I really heavily process them in Photoshop and turn them into painting type things. And so I've created some on Rarible. I've created some on more recently on Mintable. And Mintable has the ability to not have me pay the fees up front. Rarible is great, does everything on chain, but it takes like 3 transactions to do kind of the whole process. And so you wind up spending a lot of money on that. And I actually I've been selling this stuff for $200, $300, something like that. And on the cheaper ones, I actually lost money in absolute terms to claim everything and kind of go through and do all the stuff. So that's been kind of my way of getting in and experimenting around this stuff. And again, the people who have been buying my stuff, they're not like, oh, that's the most amazing thing I've seen. They're like, oh, I want to give this person money anyways, and this is really cool. And so what I've been doing is basically having the NFT version, which is high quality image, but then I have an uncompressed version of the image that I've been printing to canvas through Costco primarily, and that's been super cool. It's very inexpensive to print this stuff, and so that's been fun to be able to sell something that is both an NFT work and then also that you can then print, frankly, as many times as you want and and put on your wall or give to friends or something like that. So that's how I've been doing it. In the future, I'm actually about to try Bitcoin counterparty-based NFTs, and I think that there's a lot of potential there. It's funny, for a long time, counterparty and Bitcoin was not viable for this sort of work because it was so expensive to do transactions there. And I mean, these days that's flipped. So in the early days, Ethereum, that was the real selling point, was that it was very cheap and very fast. And now it's not very cheap, and that may change, right, as they roll out their proof of stake, adaptation. But today, Bitcoin is actually cheaper. So I think that there's a lot of people, from the kind of Bitcoin side of the art scene who are like, I'm interested in NFTs, but I'm concerned that if I do NFTs on anything other than Bitcoin, then all of the people who like me and who patronize my normal art are going to get super mad at me. And not like me anymore. And so a lot of people are just sitting on the sidelines waiting. But I think that, again, these NFT projects are going to make their way to every platform because they've now proven in the marketplace that there's a real use case here. And that real use case, is hard to resist. But for a long time, the Bitcoin chain and, many of the core developers were just like, why are you putting this on Bitcoin? This is dumb. And they can be right, but Bitcoin's neutral. So it's not really their decision.
Yeah, exactly. And if it's on a side chain, I mean, it doesn't matter. Or on a layer 2 or something. Especially. Yeah. But if I would buy an NFT from you, would I also get a key, a private key to it? like in Bitcoin? Yeah, is this the same?
So the private keys correspond to the addresses, not to the specific token. But to your point, yes. Without getting too technical, Ethereum actually works a little bit differently than Bitcoin does. Bitcoin is based on little tiny chunks of Bitcoin that you call UTXOs, or unspent transaction outputs. Ethereum works on an account-based model. So instead of having, so it's more like you write a check, and then the check is drawn against your account on the blockchain, and it's settled on the blockchain. So it's a subtle difference, but it changes kind of how you use some of this stuff. Anyways, the long and the short of it is that you do something like MetaMask. I think MetaMask has become kind of the gold standard of in-browser wallets, and is very good and allows you to have your own private keys. And then to allow websites to kind of set you up to interact with them in ways that are great. The only problem with it, again, is that whenever you do anything on chain, there's a cost associated with that, and that cost is pretty expensive today.
Mm-hmm. So, as I understand, you as the issuer of the NFT, you have to pay for being on the platform and to issue or mint the NFT.
Yeah, you just have to pay to mint the NFT. You don't pay to be on the platform. At least, I mean, like, I'm sure there are platforms where that is true, but none of the ones that I've used, that's been true.
Okay. And you pay that with cryptocurrency or with your credit card?
Yeah, I mean, all the ones that I've seen have been cryptocurrency, again, because they use smart contracts. And like, the thing about a credit card is that, well, it's not going to communicate with the blockchain. And if it's not communicating with the blockchain, then you either aren't using the blockchain or you're relying on someone to communicate that information to the blockchain, which then gets us right back to where we started, which is your trust in people.
Mm-hmm. And if I would buy it, I can pay with whatever I like, or also with cryptocurrency?
So most of these, again, are like Rarible, for example. You pick one type of token that you can accept, right? So you set your price in ETH, or you set your price in, Rari, which is their on-chain, their personal rewards token. But you can't pick multiples. And I actually think that that's a huge problem. One of the products I created, tokenmarkets.com, that was the whole thing there, was I wanted the ability to set up a shop that would look like a shop, and where you could be like, here's the price in Ether, here's the price in, in Dogecoin, here's the price in, with your credit card, here's the price in all of these different arbitrary tokens, here's the price in LTB coin, and there's no dollar price, so I'm not going to set a dollar price. I'll just say that this is 100 LTB coin, and have all of that in one interface where you could load up lots of items and then check out, do one set of payments around it, and, and it just works. But that, again, requires pretty significant off-chain communication. Really, it's not a fully on-chain application. And that is where I think most of this stuff is going, is to applications that are informed by and that utilize blockchains and tokens, but that aren't built on them at a fundamental layer. And if you get around that, then you get around most of the usability problems. You get around most of the, the challenges around how do you deal with users who aren't really, comfortable custodying their own stuff. How do you deal with, again, like a multi-blockchain reality, right? But in the current platforms that I've seen, it's you pick one currency and then that gets encoded into the smart contract, and that's pretty much it.
Mm-hmm. Any recommendations for people? I mean, I have a friend, she's a photographer, and she would be interested in selling one of her works as an NFT. Also, just to try it out, to try this new form of art or technology. Any recommendations?
I think Mintable, I've been using Mintable more often, and I really like it because it has the concept of gasless issuance, which basically means you set up the token, but then the token itself isn't created until the person buys it. And when that person buys it, then they pay the fees to create it, right? And so I really like that. That makes a lot of sense to me. Now, you're pushing a cost onto other people, but it means that if you want to set up 100 different pieces, you don't have to pay all of that up front. It only gets paid when something is purchased and when somebody actually wants it enough. It all comes, so that would be kind of my suggestion in the short term. If you can get onto a curated platform, they seem to be, very successful. But again, like this all comes back to not really what are you doing, but how big is your audience, right? How big is your audience? And then like after that, it's like, all right, well, what are you doing? But the audience part is the important part of the equation right now.
And which are the curated platforms?
So I believe Foundation is one, Nifty Gateway is one. Honestly, I don't know. I have not spent a lot of time on that particular side of this world. These days, actually, I'm trying to understand what the other platforms are doing differently, right? So how is Tezos doing it, right? Because Tezos has been getting fairly popular in the NFT scene, very trendy, and the one platform I've seen so far, it looks like Tumblr, right? Like, this is not like ultra modern design, right? Like peak, pinnacle stuff. It's just like, you can do it here too. It's almost free because Tezos, transactions on these less decentralized chains are so cheap. And then these are projects, again, Tezos raised, hundreds of millions of dollars. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was a lot of money. And they got money. They got money to spend on this stuff. They probably invested in crypto. Again, the EOS play really appears to be the play, right? Which is you raise way more money than you could possibly need. And then you store most of it in, Bitcoin, right? And then you just sit back and you wait. And, you kind of win the game just by having, raised the money. And that's honestly always been my complaint about ICOs, is that the incentives get all messed up, right? You look at people like the early Ethereum projects, right? Like Augur is a perfect example. Augur is a decentralized prediction market. In practice, very few people actually use it. They raised not that much money at the time, but at a price when Ethereum was so inexpensive that, again, just by holding on to it. So what you see in these projects is that they'll launch the first version of it, which is nowhere near mass adoption or any sort of ready for anything. And then a lot of the founders will leave. And those founders, leave because they vested their tokens and now they're basically set for life and they retire and they go do something else. And on the one hand, I totally respect that. But on the other hand, if the point is to actually manifest change in real life and give people better options, then it's really not about the money. And, but again, I think, as with Beeple, it's hard to say no to being like, all right, and now I have enough money that I can basically live for the rest of my life without having to do anything. That's, I think, hard to resist. I don't think I could resist that if that was a situation that was presented with me where I didn't have to compromise my personal standards. Who could say no to that?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, as long as it's in your world, in your ethos, in aligning to your values, at least a little bit.
Yeah.
Then you would do that. Yeah. Okay, Adam, thank you very much.
We can go longer, Anita. I appreciate that I totally monopolized and talked a bunch of stuff there. So we can go another half hour if you want. Okay,
cool. You said before, or I always say, one of the advantages of NFTs is also the fact that you, as the artist or the creator, you can put in a smart contract saying, so if I sell it to you and you sell it to somebody else, I always will get a little bit of money or a percentage of it. Is this something that one is actually able to do right now, or do those platforms not offer that?
So the platforms offer it largely at a platform level. The challenges around, so right now there's a standard underway, probably multiples, but at least one standard that's currently being developed that would be, here's exactly how you implement this, into a smart contract, and then here's how, as a marketplace, you respect it and read it. Now, the reality of it is that marketplaces don't have to do this. Marketplaces have to choose that they want to do this. But I think that it's something that many will choose to do. I think that really, though, this comes down to an incentivization problem. Which is that, there's an incentive for the artist to want it. There's an incentive for the platform to want it. There's not really an incentive for the person buying it to want it, right? And so when you have the idea of a blockchain, if everything sells on the blockchain, right, and it's all smart contract transactions, then that's fine. But that means you're cutting out all the dollar transactions. It means you're cutting out all the transactions coming from other chains and a whole bunch of other potential people who would be interested in it. And so I think that what I believe will happen, and I may try to make it happen myself, is to drive this with a rewards program, where the token where the reason to honor this contract and the reason to do it is that you get back a token that says that you're a patron, basically, right? Because that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about patronage. And, we live in an era where money is crazy cheap unless you actually really need it. And if you need it, then it's basically impossible to get. But if you don't need it, then it's not. So we're in this era where, like, increasingly the people who have money are, and will even more so in the future, conduct conspicuous spending, right? Where the purpose of the spending, the purpose of the economic activity isn't really about them wanting to do something, like for monetary purposes. It's more that they want to feel good, and that there are ways that they can feel good as a result of spending money. And so I think that you'll see something like that. And I would like to see something like that, because I believe that aligns incentives appropriately. And then you use this token to set up leaderboards, right? Where it's like, here's the top patrons for all of the scene. Here's the top patrons for this particular artist. Here's the top patron for this particular style, right? For a particular platform. And that's something, again, that as a token really actually makes a lot of sense. So, so there are challenges around it, mostly in just like making it so that the game theory doesn't push people to want to cheat the system, because you can. But if you set up the incentives properly, then yeah, I think it's really powerful. And as an idea, I think it's incredibly powerful. It's something that's really, needed, because the phenomenon, I won't go into this in detail, but the phenomenon basically is that oftentimes artists wind up competing with their earlier works. And where their earlier works are the more desirable ones, they don't get any money from that. They're still producing, current works, and now their current work is less desirable than their early work, which actually causes this problem. So the idea is that if you build up this, this library of pieces that trade, and you get 2.5% off them, and like if they're well valued, then like that's real income on an ongoing basis. So I would love to see us figure that out, but there are challenges, just like everything else.
Mm-hmm. So at the beginning of the interview, we were talking about the new renaissance that Bitcoin will bring, and also this patronage system sounds a little bit like the Medici back then in these ages, who paid artists to do their work. What do you see here? What's the future here for you? What is the idea?
Yeah, so I mean, transparently, I'm actually taking a week off from Coindesk right now, and I'm focusing on my other projects, because Tokenly is still around. I hibernated it for 18 months, but when I saw the Top Shot stuff start to happen, that was the sounding bell was off. And it was obvious, because like windows open and windows close, right? Windows of opportunity. And the window of opportunity around NFTs is so wide open this year that I don't know anybody who isn't thinking along these same lines, right? And is trying to figure out, how do I best take advantage of this moment? How do I best position the change that I want to implement into the world, such that it gets pulled along by this wave that we're seeing happen right now? And how do I do that before this window closes? Because these windows always close. So I'm working on lots of things. Hopefully I'll be able to announce stuff soon. But the reality of it is that I think that the Medici type patronage thing, I think that is very much happening right now. And I think that we will start to see larger showpieces come out that really sort of start to rival the type of work that you would see there. The statue that takes a particular artisan, a year to create, right? Like those types of works are being done. It's not a statue that they're creating. It's, audiovisual experiences. It's, virtual reality stuff. It's metaverse stuff. And things that go far beyond kind of what we currently see in NFTs. And so I think the market will change aggressively once we start seeing those prestige pieces, as I like to think about them, start to come out. And then the ability to see something is not the point. The ability to be like, I'm the Medici in this situation, right? Like that's the point. And that's incredibly valuable in an era where, again, there's so much money for people who don't need it. And again, like that then feeds into this, like when you look at the Beeple sale, like that was largely two people, right? Justin Sun and Metakovan, right? And they just bid each other up and bid each other up and bid each other up until they were, they basically jumped at $50 million, right? Very close to the end. And they probably would have gone further, except Justin Sun said that he couldn't actually place his last bid. So that's the thing, is like, you don't need a lot of people to do this. You need people who care deeply, who have silly amounts of money to do it. And then that's how you wind up in this situation. And so, yeah, I mean, like, that's the world that we're in right now, is an increasing number of people have silly amounts of money. And so I think we're going to see a lot of this. And I think it's going to be a very good thing broadly, although it will be certainly like, like I said, very top heavy, right? very, like top 1%, top 5% get most of the benefit, and then everybody else gets like a little bit. But still, net, it's better than the alternative.
Yeah. I mean, do you think of monetizing your podcasts through streaming sats with Sphinx app or Breeze?
I've tried that. We're doing it right now. I really like the Lightning Network conceptually. I think that implementation-wise, like we're closer now than we've ever been to it being really usable. And I think that Sphinx Chat, again, like opened my eyes to how easy that experience could be. I still think that there are a lot of challenges around it. And I still think that... that again, like it's just like the on-ramps are getting easier, but there are still just technical challenges to actually scaling this thing to the level that we need to do. So I used to be like, when's this going to happen? When's this going to happen? And these days I'm just like, when it happens, it'll happen. Trying to predict it, trying to plan around, assumptions around that stuff is just a losing game because these are hard problems and we don't really know how to solve them. So I'm excited about that type of thing. And it's funny. So Adam Curry is one of the original podcasters, very inspirational to me. He does a show called No Agenda, and I listened to it for a long time. When I was first getting into Bitcoin, I listened to it a lot, and no ads on it, all user supported. And so very early on, I actually sent him 5 Bitcoin, and I was like. and like they got it, and I don't remember exactly how it went, but I remember being like, well, that was a dumb move on my part because they basically just made fun of me. And then like a couple of years later, they're like, oh, well, this Bitcoin thing, maybe there's something here. And so it was really cool to see that he's actually one of the driving forces behind this Sphinx Chat and behind this push to effectively take the model that they've always had with their show and turn it into something where you can just passively, by listening to it, actually stream money to them. I think that's really cool. And again, it's another kind of beaconing event, right? Where like for a long time they didn't care. But then the value got to the point where they couldn't really ignore it anymore. And so then they were like, all right, well, this is fine. Like, we'll accept this. We're not going to, have a problem with it. And then now they're to the point where they're like, oh, we see the possibilities of what you could build in the future with this. And that's really exciting to me because seeing people, again, like it's the PayPal story, right? It's like PayPal starts off completely against and then winds up being like, I see which way the wind is blowing. So we might as well get out in front of this and, use the advantage that we have while we have it. And that's the story of the whole world right now.
And I mean, what I, from personal experience, also see in the Bitcoin podcasting space is exactly what you said. I mean, Adam Curry and his podcasting 2.0 model is fantastic, but I can't switch to that because, I mean, I have the Sphinx chat set up. My feed is in there. My node is connected. And like in the last month, I made like $6.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's nice, but how shall I live off that?
It's a proof of concept. Yeah, I mean, that's really what it is. It's a proof of concept, but it's a good proof of concept. There have been so many awful proof of concepts, right, where it's like completely unusable. And it's like, all right, well, this is possible, but we're going to need, a year of user interface work and experimentation before anybody besides us is going to be able to use this. That's what I like about Sphinx Chat. Sphinx Chat is really simple. And so I like it, again, still very early adopter, but we're so much closer than we've ever been around that I find it to be personally very exciting. I try to engage on there whenever I can. I think we have 35 people in our tribe right now. I feel you, Anita.
Yeah, I think I have 41, so I'm ahead of you.
Exactly.
But to be honest, for newbies and beginners, I think the Breeze wallet is much easier to use because you don't need your own node. You just need the wallet, and you can start sending sats. I mean, from my side, like as the receiver, it's a little bit. Not as good as the Sphinx Chat because the Breeze wallet takes like, I think 5% or something. But I also can choose to share a part of the stream immediately to the podcasting 2.0 people and to the Sphinx developers, which I think is great because then you don't have to do all this accounting. Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
We will see what the tax authorities will say to that, but I think that's time. That's in the next 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, I really like protocols. I think protocols and common sets of rules that allow different applications to do things entirely their own way, but still be interconnected to each other and still be interconnected in ways that make them more useful and usable. Like, I think that is the future of this stuff. And it doesn't need to be like a formal, you know, like new cryptocurrency protocol. It's just a set of rules, right? But having that set of rules then allows a community to form. And that really is where you start to get network effects that can be really meaningful. So I haven't actually used Breeze at all. But yeah, I mean, as an ecosystem play, I love when more companies do different things that are slightly different takes on the same thing. It just means we're more likely to find the thing that really works.
Exactly, that's how innovation works. Yeah, everybody is free to use everything and to build his or her own stuff. So we're coming to an end soon. My last question, or I'm interested in Tokenly. What is it, and what can somebody like who has a small business sell stuff there, or how does this work?
So Tokenly started off, like I said, as an infrastructure play to create tools that I needed in order to do the program that I was doing at LTB. It became a project that first I was very focused on. Crowdfunding. I had participated in a lot of crowdfunding projects, and one of the problems that I had seen over and over again was that a lot of times these projects would take a year, and you know, over the course of that year, someone who had put in $40 or something like that would be like, I need that money back, right? Like, you know, like I need all the money that I can get because I had a sudden school expense come up and I need to deal with that, and it's more important than this. And in crowdfunding, there really is no way to do that, because you are giving people the money to then enact the project, right? And so I was like, a token solves this problem. All you do is, instead of giving them a reward promise, you give them a token. And now if they need to sell the thing, well, they just sell it to someone else as a token. And now that person has the claim. The money doesn't come out of, they get the money that they need. The money doesn't come out of the project. Because what would happen is that sometimes people would say, yes, I will give you a refund. And then this would trigger more people to ask for refunds because, you know, they're a little concerned. And then I even saw some projects collapse under their own weight. Like a number of them actually, back in 2013, 2014, where it's like they had so many refund requests that they, on the one hand, decline them, in which case all these people are super pissed and they go from being your biggest fans to like the people who are just harassing you. Or on the other side, you actually give the refunds and it collapses. What we discovered once we actually got in and started talking to the companies that were out there is that it fundamentally changes the risk profile around this stuff. And it makes it, when you make something transmissible, you create opportunities for it to look like money transmission. You create opportunities for all sorts of complexity that isn't in the model. And so that kind of kiboshed that. Long and the short of it is that Tokenly is a suite of different products that all kind of play different roles in the ecosystem. So tokenmarkets.com is an e-commerce platform that has the best of traditional e-commerce built into it, with all of the kind of advanced token stuff that we were working on. So in addition to being able to sell tokens or accept tokens as forms of payment, you can also set them up as access tokens, where the only way you can access something to buy is because you have a particular combination of tokens set by the person who's setting that. Or you can set up tokens that represent discounts, where if we see in your wallet that you have a particular token, then that corresponds to a particular discount on a product or something like that. And you don't have to spend it. It's just like, you know, it's like a membership badge or something like that. So that's that. Token Pass is a product basically where you prove to the service. It's like a standard like a login with Facebook kind of thing. But the difference is that you prove to the service that you own a particular Bitcoin, Ethereum, or whatever address, and then it tracks that, and then you log into applications using a username and password, or by signing a message with your wallet, and then you authorize certain types of information to that project, right? So instead of logging with MetaMask and the project knowing what your address is and all of the different tokens that you have the ability to turn on or off tokens, right? Or you have the ability to restrict it such that rather than looking at your balances, it says, does this user have this token, and 4 of that token? Yes or no, right? And so you just kind of can, you on the one hand make it so that you can deal with people who aren't sophisticated enough to set up a wallet. And on the other hand, you make it so that users who are sophisticated enough to set up a wallet can have a lot more privacy than they get in that traditional circumstance. And then the final product is token.fm, which is basically like a service that allows you to associate and bundle any sort of media content with a token. So you bring in a token, it's the Anita Posh token, and you say, all right, anybody who owns my Anita Posh token gets access to my podcast a week early. And then you release it on that, and effectively it is a streaming service backend for that. And then also it's accessible via API. So you can actually port this out to your website itself and say, anybody who has my token, log in here, and and then you can access this content kind of upfront. There's a lot more to it, but that's kind of the basics of it, and I won't go too deeply into it. So right now you cannot use it. So for a long time, we were very focused on creating these platforms as things that we wanted to onboard people onto, and make big. So everybody would use token markets, right? And over the last couple of years, I really came to believe that that is the wrong approach. And I believe most people are taking the wrong approach right now. What I've seen is that everybody wants their own thing. They don't want to build someone else's brand. They don't want to participate in someone else's brand. They want to build their own brand. And so I've increasingly gone to a white label first approach, which basically means that we build platforms, but then those platforms, like, we have demos of them up, but really it's about, having someone who comes along and is like, I want the ability to do this, this, and this. And then they launch their own versions of the platforms. They bring in their own audience to it. They use it themselves, and Tokenly is just a service provider in the background. And again, that's the role that I want to play. I want to be, again, I want to enable all of this stuff, but I don't want to be involved with it. I don't want to be a partner. I don't want to, take a big rev share or anything like that. I just want it to be possible. I want it to be easy, and I want it to be something where, again, people can have better options to then do what they want, to enact kind of their vision of that stuff. And I think, again, that's what cryptocurrency comes back to, is it's, the reason why getting back to the very beginning of our conversation, the reason why I was so interested in Bitcoin is because of the idea of unstoppable competition for currency. We've seen lots of people try to make better forms of money before, and they've never been allowed to do that because there's a monopoly on money, lots of monopolies on money, actually, regional monopolies, and you can't really fight that in a traditional sense. But if you use a blockchain, well, it's not that you're fighting it, it's that you're almost operating on a different plane of existence from it, right? And so it doesn't matter what they want to do. They can flail all they want, but you're intangible in a way that makes it very, very easy to demonize and very hard to fight. So it comes back to that for me, at the highest level, is that this is about giving people better options than they currently have without it. And if you do give people better options, it doesn't mean that they should take it. It means that they should choose whether they take it. And we should all choose what we do.
Well, I'm very much looking forward to the news, what you're working on. And at the end of May, you said there will be something new.
So I'm always working on way too many things. Like I said, this NFT that I'm really excited about. I didn't make it, somebody else made it. But I got an exclusive for it for a show that I'm launching about NFTs. And so that'll be coming out towards the end of May. And it will be hard to miss, I think, when it does come out. And then as far as all this Tokenly stuff is concerned, like I said, I'm full-time at Coindesk, so I'm kind of juggling, right? So I'm spinning up the other team, right? And then I'm going back over there because I don't want to take any money from the project. I just want this stuff to manifest in real life, right? That's really where I am now, is when you've been here as long as I have, I mean, and even before that, I think we all just want change so much. We just want, again, the money is the money, right? The money is money. And that's great. If you get rich off this, then that's fantastic. But the real get here is autonomy, right? Is opportunity, and is kind of choice. And so I believe that we are closer to that than we've ever been. I hope that is what manifests in real life. But I've learned over the last number of years that it's really, really hard to do that. And you can go in with the best of intentions, and many people don't go in with the best of intentions, but you can go in with the best of intentions, and your chances of succeeding are probably still maybe 1%, right? So it's a game that's very important to play, but it's also a game where we look around and it's oh, I see all these projects that are successful, and this is called survivor bias, where because we only see the ones that are still around, because we see the ones that are successful, we assume that there's a higher likelihood of success that is for all of us. And it's just not true. The challenge is there. The technology has really never been the challenge. When Bitcoin introduced the idea of a blockchain, the idea of Byzantine fault tolerant, consensus, that was the hard problem really that we've solved. And everything else since then has been figuring out what are the implications of this? What else can we do with it? What does this empower us to change about the world? So, like there'll be more breakthroughs like that, but it's very hard to predict. And honestly, the important one has already happened. So I'm excited to see where this goes. I'm very excited to see if Ethereum can actually, successfully make the jump to proof of stake. Because if they do, that'll be the new paradigm that we're operating in, is launching as proof of work and then migrating over to a proof of stake. Because again, like for all the, innovation that happens in this space, like most of this is just following perceived best practices, right? Like what worked for Ethereum? Oh, I'm going to do that thing. I'm an Ethereum killer now, right? Except like I changed this number over here. Like, oh, Bitcoin. Oh, well, what if we increase the supply? What if we decrease the block size to 1 minute, or the block time to 1 minute, and we increase the amount to 10,000 Dogecoin issued on a per block basis, right? And now that's Dogecoin, right? Like it's a better version of Bitcoin in a very specific sense. And again, like all of that stuff is great, but the important innovations have already happened, and we just needed to continue to filter through to reality, and that's getting closer every day.
Yeah, exactly. Filtering is a very important tool that you need. Yeah, what is important and what's not important. Yeah, to distinguish that. Yeah.
And who knows in the current environment? I mean, that's the other crazy part about it, is like for everything that's important about Bitcoin, the environment that we're in right now is the most important factor by far, probably by an order of magnitude compared to the actual technology itself. Without that driving it, without that need for some type of alternative, and without the cognitive dissonance that I believe that the current environment generates, right? The sense that something is wrong, but everyone is telling you that nothing is wrong. Like that, I think is, like that's what's driving a lot of this. And in the casino, right? Like which is really where we are. Like the best games are the ones that have the least to them. And so again, like you look at something like Doge, and it's easy to understand, like that's what it is. And it's not about hard money, right? It's not about like this being some good form of something. It's just about it being, the times that we're in. And it's good and it's bad, but it just is.
We will stay and we will see what's going on in the next 3, 4, 5 years and how it turns out.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. Where can people find and follow your work?
Yeah, so I do a morning show for Coindesk called Markets Daily. You can look that up on any sort of podcast player. So the Let's Talk Bitcoin show has been rebranded as Speaking of Bitcoin as of mid last year. And so you can find us at speakingofbitcoin.show. You can also find us on Andreas Antonopoulos' YouTube channel, and pretty soon we'll be distributed elsewhere as well. And you can always email me at adam@speakingofbitcoin.show. I'm fairly responsive. As I said, I'm always doing like 40% too much, but I try to respond whenever I can. And, thank you very much for your time, Anita. It's always good to talk to you.
Thank you very much for all you told us. Incredible stories. I didn't know that you sent 5 Bitcoin to Adam Curry.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Okay, yeah, thank you. And I hope see you again soon.
Yes, thank you, Anita.
Bye. Thanks so much for joining the Anita Posch Show today to learn more about Bitcoin. You can find the show notes for this conversation on anita.link/show. If you want to get the best stories in Bitcoin from my point of view in your mailbox, go to anita.link/weekly and subscribe. And if you have a question or just want to send me some feedback, drop me a line at hello@anitaposch.com. See you next week when it's time for the Anita Posch Show. Music, start with yes, delicate beats. Content, idea and production, Anita Posch.